Today we're going to talk about some of the incredible and, often totally hidden stories of Black inventors. These are people who literally shaped the world we live in. But we're also going to ask, why was their genius so often erased from the history books? And how are we finally bringing their legacies into the light?
All right, so to kick things off, let's jump right into a story. We're going all the way back to 1916, and we're going to meet an inventor whose single greatest act of heroism, well, it threatened to destroy absolutely everything he'd worked for.
I mean, think about that for a second. Your biggest success could ruin you? It sounds crazy, right? But for a man named Garrett Morgan, this was his reality. He was a truly brilliant inventor, creating devices to save lives, only to discover that saving those lives might actually cost him his entire career.
So just try to picture this scene. It's 1916. There's this massive, catastrophic explosion, deep inside a natural gas tunnel, like 250 feet beneath Lake Erie. Workers are trapped. Rescue parties keep trying to go down, but the poisonous gas is just too much. They keep failing. And all the while, the clock is ticking for the men trapped down there.
Okay, so when all hope seems lost, the police make one last, desperate call. They get a hold of a local guy, an inventor named Garrett Morgan. See, he had this brand new invention he called a safety hood, and it was basically an early version of the gas masks we have today.
So what does he do? Morgan and his brother, they strap on these safety hoods, they go down into that toxic chaos themselves, and they come back up with 8 survivors. It was an absolutely heroic feat. I mean, the man was a hero, no question. But the national news coverage that followed revealed something about him, something he had very, very carefully hidden from his customers.
On one hand, the rescue was a huge success, right? It proved his invention worked flawlessly under the worst conditions imaginable. But on the other hand, it was a total commercial disaster. And here's why. The newspapers revealed that Garrett Morgan was a black man. In the segregated America of 1916, that was a problem. Fire departments, especially in the South, immediately started canceling their orders. So the question is, how does something like that happen? How does a life-saving device become a failure, literally overnight?
You see, Garrett Morgan's story, as powerful as it is, isn't just about one man's struggle. No, it's a perfect window into these huge, powerful systems that were, for centuries, basically designed to hide or even erase Black innovation.
And these obstacles, they weren't always the same. They actually changed over time. So in the antebellum era, before the Civil War, it was a legal impossibility. An enslaved inventor just couldn't get a patent, period. Then, during the Jim Crow era, that changed. The legal right was there, but it was replaced by the threat of violence and what we're calling self-censorship, where inventors had to hide who they were. And then by the 20th century, it became something different again, corporate anonymity, where your brilliant idea just got swallowed up by the company you worked for.
Let's dig into that first one, the legal impossibility. It was this crazy catch-22. So, get this. An enslaved mechanic named Ned invents this super effective double cotton scraper. His enslaver tries to patent it, right? But the patent office says, nope, you can't because you didn't invent it. But then Ned, the actual inventor, couldn't patent it either because as an enslaved person, he wasn't legally a citizen. So the invention was just stuck. It was in this legal limbo, totally free for anyone to copy and make money from.
So after the Civil War, things changed. Black inventors could legally get patents, but that legal wall was just replaced by social and economic walls. This is where that self-censorship comes in, and it brings us right back to Garrett Morgan. He actually had to hire a white actor to pretend to be the inventor, and Morgan himself would pose as like the sidekick during sales demonstrations. Just think about that. He had to hide his own genius just to sell his life-saving product. Okay, so this pattern of hiding and erasing inventors, it's not just about individuals we've never heard of. It actually forces us to take a second look at some of the most famous stories and biggest brands in American history and see the hidden figures who were there all along. Take Jack Daniel's whiskey, for example. For more than 150 years, the official story was that Jack learned how to make whiskey from a white preacher. But that's not the real story. The truth is, the man who taught him everything was Nearest Green, an enslaved man who was the true master distiller. He's the one who perfected that special charcoal filtering process that defines Tennessee whiskey. So you see, the secret ingredient, it wasn't a recipe, it was a person.
All right, how about the light bulb? We all learn about Thomas Edison in school, right? But what about Lewis Latimer? See, Edison's first light bulb, it didn't work that great. The filament burned out super fast. It was Lewis Latimer who invented a much more durable carbon filament. That was the invention that made the light bulb practical and affordable for every home. So he wasn't just some assistant to guys like Bell and Edison. He was a powerhouse inventor in his own right, the guy who solved the key problems that made their big ideas actually work for the rest of us.
So as we get into the 20th century, the challenges for Black innovators change again. They become less about individual prejudice and more about, well, the institutions themselves. And there is no better example of this than the truly incredible story of NASA's hidden figures.
So, during the height of the space race, NASA hired these absolutely brilliant Black women mathematicians. They were called human computers because, well, that's what they did. They did all the math by hand that was critical for sending astronauts into space. But they were forced to work in a completely separate, segregated unit. Their work was absolutely essential, but their names almost never made it onto the official reports.
And this leads to one of my favorite stories, the story of Katherine Johnson. So NASA gets these brand new fancy IBM computers to calculate John Glenn's flight path into orbit. But before he goes, what does he say? He says, get the girl to check the numbers. He was talking about Katherine Johnson. He literally trusted her brain more than the brand new supercomputer. Just think about that. Before sending a man into orbit around the Earth, the final check, the gold standard, was Katherine Johnson's mind.
And this is where the strategic genius of Dorothy Vaughan comes in. She was the supervisor of this unit of human computers, and she saw the writing on the wall. She knew that these new electronic computers were going to make their jobs obsolete.
So what did she do? Did she panic?
No. She taught herself the new programming language, Fortran, and then she retrained her entire team. She saw a crisis coming and she turned it into an opportunity, making her team completely indispensable to NASA's new integrated programming department. Just wow.
So you might be wondering, if all these stories were so deeply buried, how do we even know them now? Well, it didn't happen by accident. It's all thanks to decades of really determined work by people who are basically historical detectives. And this work started over 100 years ago with pioneers like Henry Baker. He was a Black patent examiner, and around 1900, he took it upon himself to prove that Black ingenuity was real. He painstakingly sent out thousands of letters to lawyers all over the country, slowly building the very first database of Black inventors just to prove they existed. And that same detective work is still happening today. You have researchers like Margot Lee Shetterly, who wrote the book Hidden Figures, and Fawn Weaver, who's the one who uncovered the real story of Nearest Green. These are people who dig through dusty archives, track down family members, and find clues buried in tiny footnotes, piecing it all together to give us these powerful stories we can finally share.
And because of all that tireless work, the official record is finally being corrected. We're seeing this massive shift from total anonymity to public recognition. From being erased from reports to getting major honors, these incredible figures are finally moving from the footnotes of history right onto the main page, where they belong.
And the results are real things you can see and touch. I mean, Katherine Johnson received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. NASA named a whole research facility after her. The Hidden Figures received congressional gold medals. There are new museum exhibits and new lesson plans going into schools to make sure the next generation grows up knowing exactly who these people were and what they did.
Which, it leaves us with one last really important thought. History isn't just a set of facts that happened a long time ago. It's something that we are actively, constantly uncovering. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Whose hidden story, whose lost genius is still out there, just waiting in some archive for someone to find it?